So, hey, I'm happy to be here, and I wanted to show you a design case I prepared. I applied for a company. They asked me to once do a task for them in order to show that I can go through the whole UX design process. So today I want to go with you today and show you what I've done for them. And they were quite happy with it in the end, so maybe you can learn one or two things from it. So let's get started. Let's make it small. Voila. So the task was the following. They said company XYZ has made a choice to move away from the traditional physical buttons in all products and switch them to a touch UI on their new washing machine series. I had to plan a UX design process required and draft a touchscreen UI concept. And that's what the process looked like. Nothing too exotic here. We have typical like a research phase, the requirements. Then we moved into a lo-fi design, lo-fi prototype, testing the lo-fi design, lo-fi prototype, and finally do a hi-fi design, hi-fi prototype. So let's start right off with the research. So a washing machine is the first thing. Obviously, what you do, you go and check out, in my case, my domestic washing machine. I looked here at the screen size and got a potential screen estate, like by measuring it, like, okay, height 8 centimeters with 14 centimeters. Then I went into a good journal in which they test washing machines in order to get like the top tier washing machines right now out there and check out what their screen looks like. So if you're the Bosch, if you're a Miele and a Siemens machine. So I took them, I made a little analysis for myself, like I noted down some points about them. Strength, weaknesses, nothing too serious here. I mean, just stuff that pops up your mind. No bulletproof scientifically things I write there. And then in order to think about outside of the box, I didn't only look at washing machine screens, but also went, for example, here I checked out our oven. Yeah, I compared like what does the UI look like when the oven is running? What does it look like when I have to select the program? Also, what do warning messages look like, for example, here in Windows, or what are potential UI widgets that could be interesting to use? And finally, I stumbled over this design. I found it on Pinterest. I think that's like the typical thing everyone does. First, you go on Pinterest, you type in washing machine UI, and then you see what's coming up, and that's what's one of the designs. So I really like this one. And what I liked about it was the simplicity. I thought the usability might be a bit unclear. Like here, it's not obvious if you have to swipe in this or that direction. So there's still space for improvement. But this was a good point of departure for me. And on the other side, like you have ones where you look at actual washing machines to gather design references, which are super important. And then the other part of the research is to user research. So in this case, it was like a small design case. So it wasn't expected from me to go out and do like real serious user research. So I made up this persona, which is not to recommend. Like good practices, like you really have to base your personas on data in a way that the persona reflects the data you get out about your users. So it's in real world, it's not easy to make a good persona. In this case, it's completely made up. I just noted down like motivations, goals, frustrations of this persona. Like if you go on the internet, you're gonna find like 20 different ways of making a persona. Like you always have to choose what serves best your product and what you want to represent. So in our case, we have Walter Washburn, and we design for the persona Walter Washburn. Besides that, I also made a little user journey map. Same here, user journey map usually is something to represent data you gathered. In this case, I didn't gather much data, so probably I was the point of reference here. So not good practice. And I made just a flowchart, like something very simple. You can also find many different user journey maps out there on the internet if you look for them. this case, I just had the user, like what steps he has to go through to go from dirty laundry to clean laundry. What are the bottlenecks? Probably most difficult things to sort out is like sorting the laundry to color, degree of dirtiness, whatever. And here selecting the program is kind of a bottleneck that I want to tackle and make better in the future. From that on, with our user in mind and with some basic knowledge we could gather about washing machines, we jumped right into getting some requirements. Like, I wanted my design to reflect the parameters on the washing machine, which is programs. And programs have children. The children is time, speed, temperature. That means if I change program, those 3 parameters will change as well. And I wanted to have a help hint section for better usability. And I wanted maybe to have the option to have a customizable interface. On top of that, I noted down screen estates should be 8 centimeters height, 14 centimeters width. In the end, I made it a bit wider because I thought the washing machine, you have more space to make it wider. But the height, should stay the same. And yeah, from that on, develop task scenarios. So what do I want my prototype to reflect? Like, what should my prototype be able to accomplish? So if I go to a user and say like, hey, test my prototype or test my design, I can hand them out these tasks and they can go through my prototype doing this task. And that's how I test my design. And the first one is like just very standard stuff. Like, okay, you have Kochwäsche, select the appropriate program. You want to run it at 90 degrees instead of 100 degrees, so they have to change a parameter and then run the machine. And then tomorrow, I don't want to go too much into it. And from there on, with the requirements in our mind, we jumped into a lo-fi design. What is the advantage of a lo-fi design? I mean, it's a very natural process. I mean, the first sketch you probably make on a piece of paper, which right now I don't have it here anymore. And from that, you go into a program to design a first basic interface with a certain layout. And this is very cool to do to test, because here you can really test just the layout, how you arrange things in your interface. Instead of going too deep, don't go down the rabbit hole on which colors to use, how should icons look like this confounding actually your interface. It's better to test the lo-fi setup, get this right, and then move on to the hi-fi design. Otherwise, you might end up doing a lot of work for nothing because you didn't get the basics right. And this narrow is the lo-fi prototype as it looks like. Like, you have a landing screen here. You have the program time, temp, speed here. It's scrollable. I think you can see it. You have a start button here, help settings, a menu. You can see it's arranged in a grid, which is quite modern right now. Like, it's used everywhere, grids. You have a grid here, and then kind of rule of third, maybe not really, but you have like a side menu where all these actions you can do are inside. So you have a visual separation of things I can change, parameters I can set, and then on the right-hand side, like a menu where you have the help settings. You can start an action with the start button, and maybe some icons indicating if the door is open or closed. Then we have here these widgets in order to select program or time that you can swipe up or down. It's like a roll. I really like, in this case, the Apple roll. And yeah, that's our landing screen. Now, if we would change the program, as here we change to Kochwäsche, these parameters all changed. And then finally, if we hit the start button, we would get here, this is our running screen. Like here, the focus of the user changes. Before, the focus of the user was to select the program, so it was very present what he could change. Now it's fixed, the machine is running, so we want to make most present here the time, because this is changing and all the rest he cannot change anymore because the machine's already running, so maybe it's not so important to him anymore to see it. And we could rearrange the whole screen. And the menu, to stay consistent to the previous one, the menu stayed here the same. And finally, if we would go back, you also would have the settings. In the settings, we have 3 sections. we have, again, kind of a grid. In this case, we made visual barriers in it to make it more obvious that there's a separation, to make it easier for the user. You can change the settings as we are used to by swiping up or down. You have some boxes you can tick, untick. And here your menu on the very right state where it was before too. Now we would click on Seide, Silk, for example, and then this could change. The idea here was that the user can like only show programs to him that are relevant. For example, if you don't have Silk clothes, you don't want to see the Silk program all the time on your interface. Then finally, let's say we cancel this action. Oh, warning message would appear. That's very, you probably know about this. It's like, it's the same. I took it actually from Notepad or Word or whatever. I mean, here too, don't overthink stuff. Let the guys at Microsoft do the heavy lifting and just take their interface like as they arranged it and use it for yours as well. That's also part of consistency. Like, don't waste time reinventing the wheel here. So we go, we don't save. Come back here, click here on the help to open the help menu. Now you can see like here you have question marks popping up everywhere. If you would click here, it would show you like everything you need to know about the program. Basic help thing on the screen. So now we have set up our lo-fi design, our lo-fi prototype. We would go in a testing phase. Now you would invite people that are relevant to you, like that are as your users, like the people you design for. Like you cannot design for everyone. You design for your users, and then you would let them test. Now there are different approaches. Like a common one, if you want a quick test, it says like after 5. If you test 5 people, you usually got already 80% of the insights or 90% of the insights. There's a study about it. In this case, what I found very, what was pretty smart, like that's where street smartness comes into play here in your exercise. We are programming with Figma. So if I would test my design now on a computer, I would ask them sit down and test it with my mouse here. People would use the interface completely different than it would be intended. The intention was to have it on a washing machine. So there's nothing better than grabbing a tablet or a phone in my case, accessing the prototype through the phone, gluing the phone on top of your washing machine, maybe cover up those buttons here so they are not confusing the user. And then people could test your design as it was intended to, like kneeing on the floor with not much space behind, maybe being knee deep into laundry. And then you could get real insights and see how people would interact with your interface. So assume we did all the testing and we really nailed our lo-fi design, we would go on and move into the hi-fi design, hi-fi prototyping. In this case, first step would be like establish some visual guidelines to stay consistent here, like what are the colors, what are the fonts you want to use. In this case, hypothetically, there's a company that consults you for this job, so they didn't give me any colors I should use or a font. So what I did is I go into their company website and I checked out what colors they're using for text, which font are they using, and use this in my design in order to carry on their corporate identity, which is very important. So here you establish guidelines like what's an accent color, what is the font here for headers, bodies, highlighted content. And that's what it looks like now in hi-fi design. So as you can see, we have buttons here, we have icons here established. We have different fonts we use, different sizes, and bold and regular things in order to guide the eye of the user when he looks at our interface. Now what I did, I made a first screen and I made a second screen. I made 2 variants. So if this would be a customer, I would go to him because, at first I was like, okay, program time, temp, speed, they don't need to be the most present thing on our interface. Advanced user who knows our interface, he knows the time is here. most important for him is here to see the actual time and not the top of the column. That's why I changed a bit the weight from being this most present to make this most present in my interface. In this case, I have two variants. So what you would do probably in a real life example, you would go now to your client and say like, hey, look, we have like these two variants. That's the one we prefer because of those reasons. Which one you would like to choose? And then they probably would tell you like, okay, we go with the one you like because your arguments are good. Or they don't, then it's fine too. I mean, they're the client, they're paying. So you pick this one. Now from here, if you would, so here you can see how the lo-fi design translated into the hi-fi design. So as you can see, things stayed very similar because we nailed the lo-fi design. It improved after various iterations. And now we translated into a hi-fi design. And then finally, the running machine screen, as you remember too, looks something like this in color. And that's what the two look like together. Same here. I mean, you take decisions down the road in your design for colors, where you put things. You should use references, like don't put stuff wherever, like be able to argue why you took the decision to take a button and put it here, for example. If you end up in design court for whatever reasons, and they ask you like, why did you do that? You should be able to argue and say like, oh, okay, like Steve Jobs always puts his buttons there. That's why I did it. And then, that's good. If you just say like, oh, I thought I do it like this, probably not the best answer. And this brings us also to the next topic. During testing, you're gonna figure out like things gonna change. Like you will never nail the design on the first try. So don't be frustrated when people tell you maybe that stuff's not as perfect as you thought. And finally, here we have the settings panel. Just translated also here what you already saw in the lo-fi design. Rounded up the corners here, put in colors to make it a bit more visually appealing. There's the three together of them. If you want, here's a link to the interactive prototypes. So you can check it out, or here the Figma project. So thank you for watching. Cheers.